Hey, so I just saw the third season of Disenchantment, not Disenchanted, which I think I called it in one of these reviews a long time ago, but this time I got it right. I've come so far. Anyway, it's just to give a quick recap of what I thought of the other seasons, or just the show in general. I've always had a soft spot for this show. I like the characters. I love the idea. And I always liked the potential of it, because, as you know, this is the Matt Groening show. It has the style of The Simpsons, very similar humor as The Simpsons, but there was kind of this continuing story, too. There were, it had episodic episodes, but there was also something else going on, things connected. It wasn't like Simpsons, where you could just watch one episode and then see another one, and you didn't have to see the one prior, sometimes there's in-jokes, but you could follow it fine. And usually the same thing with Futurama, too. Like, there weren't really this continuing story, so I got really excited that a Matt Groening project was doing that. But my issue was always that they still kept it very episodic, and you have all these magical places you can go, and it usually just goes back to the castle, in Dreamland there, and, that always kind of aggravated me, and then we got to the second season where it starts off on the right foot, and they're traveling, and they're continuing the story, and there's some good surprises, but it keeps going back to the castle, to this Dreamland place, and I'm just like, come on, go places, further something, and I still liked it, But that was always something I felt kind of held it back a little bit. So now we have the third season, and this one's probably my favorite. I feel like they really have their footing now, because it's funny, because they do have, without going to spoilers, they do have several episodes, where they're in the castle and stuff, but it always feels like something's being moved forward. It doesn't feel like, while some are a little episodic, or they might travel somewhere that doesn't necessarily affect everything in a huge way, there's still a sense that, like, all the little elements that have been set up in this season and the prior two seasons are starting to kind of have an effect. Like, characters that you thought were kind of just throwaway characters are, sort of pulling their weight, and they're making stuff happen, and like I said, everything feels like it's moving forward. And on top of that, it's still really funny. I feel like the humor is getting better with every season as well. The characters are still very likable. In terms of new things that they do, again, without going into spoilers, I guess you could argue they up the drama quite a bit in this. There's always been dramatic elements in it, and in this season, I feel like there's more, but for the most part, in a really well-balanced way. They don't totally abandon the comedy, and some elements look like, man, this isn't gonna go anywhere, or I'm sick of this, or this isn't working for me. And they usually bring it around. They usually find some way to really make it work. And the two that really come to mind with that is, they sort of have, you're either gonna like these jokes, or you're gonna be like me and think they're hit and miss, or you're gonna hate them. It's this type of humor that you've seen before. We've done what's really popular, like maybe 10 years ago, where it's kind of these running conversations where, there's something going on and somebody will bring up what should be just, one joke, and then, like, somebody else might have a topper to it, and then if you really want to push it, maybe you'll have, like, a third line on it. But then you have shows like Family Guy, and again, we've done this too back in the day, where you just keep running the joke, and how long can you run this joke? How long can you have this conversation? Now, that kind of humor has really died out over the past, I don't even know, 5 years or 6 years or something like that. I feel like now people are like, okay, we know what the joke's gonna be. And like I said, we've done that too. I'm not acting like we're above that humor, but that's part of jokes. You experiment, you try stuff out, you see how far you can push it. So they try to bring some of that back, and about half the time they don't work. But in my opinion, the other half are really funny, and I think what works about them is that there is this continuing story going on. There is this urgency to get certain things done. Like I was gonna say every episode, but it's more like every couple of episodes has a goal, and they sort of cross over. There's a place they have to get out of, or they have to travel to, or a person they have to save, or they have to get information from. So when you have these little conversations that pop up, that probably should have just been a line or two, but they keep them going, at least half the time, I think they're really funny, and they sound very natural to me. One is when Bean is in disguise as her mother, and another has to do with like mugs. And both of those, I'm saying to myself, I'm actually hoping to myself, these don't go anywhere. I'm hoping these don't tie in that much to the story, because it'd actually be really funny if they don't. And they are little throwaways, and I really, really got a laugh out of them. With that said, they don't all work. But even when they don't, it's not quite like Family Guy, where it's like, oh my god, I get it. Stop, please stop. There's no jokes that quite work like that. Or like I say, even jokes, we used to hammer these to death too, so trust me, when I talk about this, I'm aware we've done it too, so don't worry about that. But it was nice seeing that in this show, because I haven't seen this kind of humor in a while. And again, kind of for good reason. I think people just got sick of it. It was neat at the time, and now it's like, okay, move on. Like, fast humor is back again. I mean, like, super, like, throwing 3 or 4 jokes at you at the same time. And this show sometimes does that too. It's more of a... I don't want to say it's slower paced. It's very, lack of a better word, normal paced. It's like, okay, this is the pace a show like this would normally go, and that's fine, considering how the pacing before, sometimes would get a story going and then just abandon it, and you're back just in the castle, with them getting drunk or something like that. And they stumble, I don't know, across a peasant and get in trouble or something like that. Something you don't care about when you had a really good story going. With this, there's not only one story, but there's several stories going. So I feel humor like this really works in this environment, and it's nice to see them explore it and do it well when they have these conversations. A lot of it really sounds like they're having these conversations and they're kind of talking over each other half the time. And I thought they, like I said, at least half the time, really nailed it. And when it didn't work, it was not irritatingly so. There was just a sense of like, okay, we tried that. Now the next joke, or now the next scene. It didn't feel like it lingered too long. The other thing that I think I know I did, but I'll be curious to see if you did watching it, is with the character of the king. There's actually 2 characters that get a little sidelined in this for a good chunk of the season. One is Luci, which I was really surprised by. I thought, like, they really like writing for that character, and he usually has good lines. It's a funny actor doing it. But he's kind of kept to the side a lot of the time. He comes back a little bit more at the end, but like he kind of opens his own shop, and you think that'd be fun, but you don't see a lot of that, which is a little strange. So that was a little bit of a letdown. But the king in this has this thing where he's driven mad. I guess I won't tell you how, but it's not a fun kind of mad. He kind of like makes honking sounds and says gibberish and stuff like that. And he's like that through most of the season. I like the king in the show, but I wasn't really digging this that much until you get to a scene where Bean like really addresses it and really tries to communicate with him, because she's off doing her own stuff, and the king's just said to be mad, and some of the people under him are trying to take advantage of this, and so, but at some point she comes in and says, okay, let me really try to figure this out and try to communicate with him, try to figure out what's wrong. And they sort of do this near the end, and there's some really good emotional character building in this. I was talking about, I think I was talking about with some of the Steven Universe, like future stuff, how there's nothing wrong with crying, but it's like it's like action scenes. Use it at the right moments, so they can be the most effective. And there's not a lot of crying in the show, but there is one when Bean's talking to her dad, and I'm just like, that's like really, really sad. Like, it's a really emotional moment, but it still has the comedy too, because he is kind of in his own brain. I mean, he is kind of nuts and is trying to figure out how do you communicate with him. And the further and further it goes, it becomes less of a joke and more of like a really serious thing. Like, you're kind of saying goodbye to a parent, like the parent you knew, and you know, you gotta, you know, step up where he can't be. So I really like that, because that was an element I really thought was, you know, just being lost in translation, like it was just not coming through, and I really thought they delivered on. So also make it clear there is not necessarily one continuing story going through this. I mean, you know, you're following Bean and Elfo and stuff like that, but so there are still several stories. You're not just stuck on one the whole time, but all of them are interesting and have their own mysteries and have their own sort of open cliffhangers. And, you know, again, the ending of this is a cliffhanger. I mean, they always are. That's not a spoiler. And every one of them is pretty interesting. My favorite two, again, this is from the other ones, you can see this in the advertisements, is with the mother. That's fastly becoming the most interesting character because there is so much mystery around her. And even in this season, you're just still going, is she good? Is she bad? What is this? Well, what is going on? Like, how are they going to end with this character? Is she going to end as a hero or a villain? And then the other is with Steamland again, which they'd gone to before, but she returns to. And I don't know. It's like I remember they went to Steamland before, but I don't remember any specifics about it. I just remember how it looked. But I don't even remember, like, why they went there. Where with this one, I remember so much more about it. I remember the characters, especially the actors around it. They're slowly getting the IT crowd in this series, which is great. They're all talented as hell. And I remember really getting into those and interested in what was going to happen. And I also like, again, with season 2, I think they journey to hell early on. And then they kind of leave and they go back to the castle. I'm like, oh, what I like about this is that it does pick up where it left off. And it's there an adequate amount of time. But then it'll kind of go somewhere else. And, you know, and sometimes they do return to the castle. But it doesn't feel like, okay, now we're just here for the rest of the season. It's like, no, they will travel other places. And again, even when they are in the castle, stuff is going on. And most of the humor's pretty funny. It's still, I mean, the thing with the show is that it's always been a little hit and miss, but the misses aren't painful. I say, unlike a show like, I'll just say Rick and Morty, because that's a really funny show. You know, most of the jokes in Rick and Morty hit, and the ones that don't are more just a personal preference. Like, I get what they were trying to do. There's some jokes in this where I'll just watch and I'll be like, I don't know what the intent of that joke was. Like, was it just to be silly? Was it just to be weird? And it's fine if it is, because there are a lot of weird and silly jokes in this where I just shrug and say, that just made me laugh because it's goofy. But then there's other jokes where, you know, there's a lot of wordplay, there's a lot of analogy, there's a lot of smart humor to it. There's several where you kind of got to think about it for a second and go, oh, okay, I see what they were, you know, trying to do with that. But then there's a few where I'm just like, I have no idea what you were trying to do with that. But even when those happen, again, they're not painful because there's always a different kind of joke around the corner. And maybe that's what I like about this show, is that even when a joke doesn't hit, they're gonna try a different kind. They're gonna mix it up. And even with like the dramatic moments, you know, there's like this big, without giving anything away, big evil something that's heading towards the kingdom, because isn't there always? And they're really, really building it up. And then, kind of when you see what it is, it's like, oh, all right. But then they'll kind of do a twist and maybe something else is coming. And that looks like something big. But no, that's just something kind of small, kind of not at the same time. And then something else is trying to sneak in. So I like this idea where you're building up this big threat. And then it kind of doesn't deliver, but then something else does, and then that kind of doesn't deliver, but then something else does, and then the thing you thought didn't deliver is actually doing something else. So I really like that. It doesn't feel like a letdown. It feels like, kind of like what, I hate using this analogy, like what Last Jedi was kind of trying to do, where it's setting you up for something and then giving you something else, but instead of something else kind of not amounting to much, it secretly is doing something else that actually is, like, of value and is gonna come back later, which I really like. The voice acting, again, is very funny. Everybody's on point. I feel like Elfo's gotten a lot better, because that was the one character I thought, like, I could not get an idea what this character was about or like, whatever, and he's just kind of becoming, like, I don't want to say just the oddball, because they're all kind of odd, but he seems like a character who's trying to, like, figure himself out now, which I like, and he doesn't know / sometimes doesn't care where it leads him, and I feel like even the writers sometimes don't always know where certain elements are going to go, but that's part of the fun. I think the only thing, in terms of drama, the only thing I didn't really get into is there's this, again, I won't give away too much, but there's this side story with a mermaid, and I'm totally down with what they were trying to do with it, but it did not feel very natural. It felt kind of forced, and part of that could be, I'm watching Doom Patrol right now, and it has, like, one of the best romantic chemistries I've ever seen. Like, just this really heartbreaking love story, and every time I watch it, I'm like, oh my god, like, I just feel for this couple. It's this pilot, this other person that's in, I think, the Air Force, and it's just so well done, and I'm watching that literally at the same time I'm watching Disenchantment, so maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe I'm kind of jaded with how well that one is done, where when you get this one that just kind of sounds like talking, just like normal talking, which I get, I mean, that's part of it, but it's not super interesting, especially in this world where they do a very good job combining kind of everyday talk and these fantasy elements. Like, this just felt like two people talking, which usually I'm down for, but something in this, it did not mix with everything else. I thought what they did with the father and daughter near the end, it felt more in the comfort zone of what this show is really strong at. In terms of, it is dramatic and it does feel real, but it's also something really silly and zany and goofy at the same time. But they use that to kind of translate this very serious drama going on as well. It's finding the comedy in the drama. So that's the only element I personally it wasn't getting into, or I felt could have been stronger anyway. And even when it's all done, when I'm looking back at this season, I realize there is a lot of stuff they kind of start and then don't always follow through with, but then there's other times, like there's characters that come back from other seasons in this show, where I even had to remind myself, and I'd say, oh, okay, so like that does kind of come back, and a lot of these elements from like maybe season 1 and season 2 that you thought didn't really go anywhere, they do tie it into something, so I guess it's totally possible they could do that, with the mermaid in this too. And there are a lot of elements that they start and they don't finish, they don't entirely follow through, but there's still at least another season coming, and you want to see where it's going to go. You want to see, like with some of the characters from Steam City and stuff like that, you want to see how that's going to follow through. So I really like this season. I think it's their strongest so far. I really want to see the rest like this. I really think this is a good compromise because, like I said, I always said I wanted to see them travel and go other places and have this continuing story, and they are doing that, but they are going back to the castle too, but still moving stuff forward, so they're not entirely breaking away from what they started with, which is very tricky to do. You want to evolve something, but you don't want to completely become something different at the same time. You want to have the essence of what you started with. So I think this is a good compromise. I think they really, really have a good momentum going now, and I want to see more. Every time one of these ends, I want to see more. They're really good at leaving the cliffhangers to a point where you're like, well, what's that about? Or who's that? Or, maybe it's this person. Maybe this is what they're going to do. And especially now that I feel like they're really kind of tying it in with like these continuing stories, I should say. I was going to say continuing story, but they figured that out too. They should have a couple going at the same time, like several stories and characters that all have motivations or all trying to get some kind of goal that, backstab somebody else or something like that. So I really dug it. So if you've seen this third season of Disenchantment, let me know what you think about it. Again, I haven't looked up reviews or anything like that, so I don't know if people are loving it, hating it, or somewhere in between, but I really enjoyed it. It's probably the one I was the most satisfied with, and arguably the most... the most drawn in by, where I'm like, what is going to happen next, continually throughout the whole thing. Maybe in like season 2, I was a little bit more, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But again, it would kind of be resolved very quickly and they just go back to the castle. But this is the one where just throughout pretty much the whole season, I was excited to see what was going to happen next. And I was excited to see what characters were going to return, what new ones they were going to add, what they were going to do, what surprises they were going to mix in there as well. Is this a good guy now or a bad guy now? Alliances of convenience. I always love that in shows, and they definitely have that with some of the people in the castle. So I really enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Did it come through for you, or did you think some parts fell flat, or did you hate it? Let me know, and I will just see you next time. Take care.